I'm delighted to be standing here as a stand-in. It's been my life's ambition to be a stunt double. Well, it's either that or we swing it through 90 degrees and do everything against this. Okay, and that way, well, the thing is you get all the shit of stupid, come and see Hamilton and what have you. I mean, if you decide to do it this way and then have it as a completely neutral background, he's going to be in the shade.
But if we put this up, just point it up a bit.
You ain't going to do diddly in this light. You either...
We're all in it together. We all put it like together. We all got the same shot. Exactly. It says industry standard.
Shall we do him in the shade? Shall we swing it through 90 degrees? Do we care? Right, that's a no. Okay, we'll leave it as is. Alright.
Hats off, mate. Hats off. Yeah.
When they say where do you... I look like a tourist stuck on a hat in my head. I look behind the man, directly behind. my side. If you're shooting up, he's in bright sunlight. Okay.
Where's my bag?
Michael?
Where's the bag, Michael? Stick this on you because you want to ask a question. Or do you think you won't want to?
Well, she said she's not answering questions, but I can always ask
Stick
her.
it on you. We can use it for the, if you want to put it in properly, if we've got time, we can always use it for the.
Camera. Is it on?
No, hang on.
I'll do it.
Is it on? Just power. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it? It's funny, whenever I watch a film and there's like the press are following someone, I'm like, so to be.
That's it.
Very
It's
occasionally
terrible,
it
isn't
does,
it?
and you're like, oh, this
Fucking
is
hell.
so wrong. Do I still need to stand here? A 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Well, click my hands. Don't forget I've got this radio mic on. I had... Can we talk? I had homemade granola for breakfast because of my fancy pants. I'll be talking around this level. Well, I don't know what level she'll talk at. Got my wires in a right old mess here. Yeah. Can I move, or does anyone else need me to talk? No? All good? I can take them off. Good luck. I'm done.
One, two, three, four, five, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to stand here. All of you gathered. Thank you.
what I like about seeing you is then I know I'm not the oldest man still swinging again.
Isn't it just sensitive subject at the moment? So stop
Really?
it. No. I don't think this will.
That was from
Yeah.
background.
I'll move it back here.
It was beautiful. I don't know why. It was reason shape. That wasn't a shape. Looked like the RCJ and you couldn't do that one for the much.
They start when you go.
Appeal, we have just witnessed legal history, the victim of the longest miscarriage of justice in British legal history, 38 years. He has just had his conviction quashed. His name is Peter Sullivan. He was jailed 38 years ago for the murder of barmaid Sullivan. Today you had this hearing of the 3 judges that listened, and they made a ruling. New DNA evidence shows that it was not him that was involved in the murder. He will be released from Wakefield prison imminently, and the Merseyside police this lunchtime are saying they will reopen the investigation. way, guys. Thank you. Charles, Paul,
I think maybe your body will be, yeah.
Well, if you come forward a little bit, it's not too bad.
So right up here against the...
No, that's good.
You need to come forward because of the sound and stuff. You need to like.
Is everybody ready? Yep, thumbs up from everyone. This is an unprecedented and historic moment. Our client Peter Sullivan is the longest serving victim of a miscarriage of justice in the UK. He has endured nearly 40 years in a Category A prison for a truly horrific crime that he did not commit. Today, justice has been at last served and his conviction has been quashed. Since his conviction in 1987, Peter has maintained his innocence. Peter's consistent insistence that he wasn't guilty has been supported by us at Switolski's, and today we are one step closer to justice for Peter. While we are overjoyed that Peter's innocence has been recognised, we remain acutely aware of the lasting impact caused by this horrific crime in 1986. Our thoughts are with Diane Sindle's family, friends and the community who have been deeply affected by what happened. This historic ruling leaves urgent and serious unanswered questions. Peter is a private and quiet person who has just spent almost 40 years isolated from the world. What he has been through is unimaginable. We respectfully ask that he is now given the space and privacy to come to terms with the enormity of this moment, the recognition of his innocence, as well as to adapt to his reinstated freedom. Peter has asked me to read this message on his behalf. I lost my liberty 4 decades ago over a crime I did not commit. We now know how very different the times we live in are, from scientific advances, legal practice and methods of investigation and questioning by the police. What happened to me was very wrong, but it does not detract or minimise that all of this happened off the back of a heinous and most terrible loss of life. I did not commit murder or unlawfully take the life of any person throughout the span of my own. As God is my witness, it is said, the truth shall set you free. It is unfortunate that it does not give a time scale. As we advance towards resolving the wrongs done to me, I am not angry, I am not bitter, I am simply anxious to return to my loved ones and family, as I've got to make the most of what is left of the existence I am granted in this world. I am aware of how cruel time can be to a person stripped of their youth and mobility, sight and hearing. I have had to silently endure this and watch it stripped from me in the worst environment imaginable. I will not comment on the horrors done to me over that time. There are too many. With this, I humbly request that you allow me my privacy while I begin repairing what I may from the driftwood that is my life. I am so grateful to Sarah Myatt and Jim Littlehales from Switolski Solicitors, who have been committed to my case for 20 years. They have stood by me through the good times and the bad while I fought to prove my innocence. I would also like to thank Jason Pitter, my KC, and Emily Cairns and her team from the CCRC. Without the combined efforts of Sarah, Jim, Jason and Emily, this outcome would not have been possible. I will be eternally grateful to each and every one of them.
Thank you also to the Miscarriage of Justice Support Service. Matilda and Leon have been very helpful in helping me prepared for today. I would also like to say thank you to my loved ones and family members who have stood by me and who continue to support me through this. Finally, I would like to say how sorry I am to the family of Diane Sindel, who have now got to come to terms with the death of their daughter being down to someone else, and I long to see the right thing done for this horrible crime so that they will find peace. Thank you for listening to me. Switolski solicitors will continue to support Peter through this overwhelming transition and continue to stand beside him in the pursuit of truth and accountability. Thank you.
Sarah, tell us how Mr. Sullivan was.
We weren't able to speak to him, but I'm hoping to speak to him later.
Do you know how soon it'll be?
I don't, I'm afraid, no. That's down to the prison service. It will be today.
Is there anything Mr. Sullivan's family wants to say?
You'd have to speak to them about that, whether they want to speak to you.
When the time's right, we will. But right now, we just want to get used to what's going on. At the end of the day, it's not just us that's going through this, it's also the Sindel family. They've lost a daughter that they're not going to get back. We lost Peter for 39 years. We're lucky we have got him back. So there is a lot to think about.
I'm not...
Right, okay. We've lost Peter for 39 years. And at the end of the day, it's not just us. We haven't won. Peter hasn't won, and neither is the Sindel family. They've lost their daughter. They're not going to get her back. We've got Peter back, and now we've got to try and build a life around him again. So at the end of the day, we feel sorry for the Sindels, and it's such a shame that all this has had to happen in the first place. So, but that's it now.
Phil, when you heard the news just now,
Ecstatic. It shouldn't have happened in the first place, and now it's out in the open. Everybody knows about it now, and let's hope people will start respecting all our wishes now and understand that Peter was called so many different names, and that all needs to be squashed now, because Peter was never anything of what he's being called in the first place. So thank you very much.
Great.
My name's Kim. I'm his sister. Yeah. Smith.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
think it possible that you may be mistaken. Well, that's no small challenge, but we all have to try much harder. Thank you for your time, and go well this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item of business is topical questions, and at question number 1 I call George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment is made of implications for Scotland's public services of the UK Government's proposed reforms to the immigration system.
Minister Colcab-Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scotland's public services, communities and economy all benefit from inward migration. The Scottish Government does not support the majority of the proposals within the UK Immigration White Paper and calls on the UK Government to reverse these deeply damaging measures. The decision to end international care worker recruitment and planned changes to the graduate visa and skilled worker visa are short-sighted and will prove damaging to sectors which necessarily rely on international talent. Scotland's working age population is growing only because of migration. Scotland requires a tailored approach to migration to meet our distinct demographic and economic needs.
George Adam.
I thank the Minister for her answer. Scottish Care has warned that Labour's plans to scrap care workers' visa route would be profoundly damaging to Scotland's social care sector and fails to recognise the country's distinct demographic and workforce challenges, putting vital services at risk and directly harming those who rely on them. Does the Minister share these concerns, and can she confirm whether the Scottish Government was consulted, or is Scotland's demographic reality once again an afterthought for Westminster?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I fully agree with the comments that were made by Scottish Care. Plan to end the international recruitment of care workers will be devastating for the care sector in Scotland. And whilst I can confirm that the Scottish Government issued a comprehensive, evidence-based proposal document to the Home Office during their development of the Immigration White Paper, there has been no substantive engagement on any of the policy proposals submitted by the Scottish Government, and the White Paper completely fails to account for Scotland's distinct demographic needs. The ban on international recruitment of care workers must not be implemented. Scotland is a welcoming nation, and one of the key principles underpinning our approach to migration is to encourage and enable long-term settlement in Scotland, welcoming people from across the world to Scotland to work, raise families and make a positive contribution to society.
George Adam.
I thank the Minister once again. Labour's plan to pull up the drawbridge mimics that of Nigel Farage's reform, rather than challenging him, and puts Scotland's public services at risk as well. Inward migration is vital for our economy and our society. Will the Minister assure us that our Scottish Government will reject Labour's pandering to Farage's politics, and does she agree that the UK Government stance betrays the open and welcoming nation that we all aspire to be in Scotland?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It is concerning that we have not heard anything from Scottish Labour on these plans, which, frankly, are designed by a Prime Minister simply pandering to Nigel Farage, instead of considering any of Scotland's demographic needs. Scotland is a welcoming nation, and one of the key principles that underpin our approach to migration is to encourage people to come here and live here and raise their families here, contribute to the economy by working, and make a positive contribution to not only society but also our culture. And Scotland will continue to actively welcome inward migration, recognise the benefits that it brings to our communities, public sector and economy. And through our online platform, Scotland's Migration Service, we will continue to attract talent to Scotland to address the barriers faced by migrants and employers when navigating the UK's increasingly unsuitable immigration system.
Thank you. Question number 2, Tess White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. After that rah-rah by the Scottish Government Minister, to ask the Scottish Government...
Sorry, Miss White. Miss White, I have called you to ask question number 2 on topical questions, and I would ask that you restrict yourself to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the announcement that NHS Grampian has been escalated to Stage 4 of NHS Scotland's National Performance Framework for Finance, Leadership and Governance.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, President Officer. Firstly, it's important to acknowledge that staff in NHS Grampian continue to work tirelessly to deliver the high-quality healthcare we expect. I have been able to see that firsthand in the visits that I have made in Grampian of late. Escalation to Stage 4 will bring enhanced support and scrutiny from the Scottish Government. This will include a whole-system diagnostic to be carried out by an external consultancy, expected to conclude in June, to help inform a tailored package of support. This intervention will provide a robust basis for the wider transformational work required over the longer term in NHS Grampian to ensure the sustainable delivery of high-quality healthcare services.
White.
Cabinet Secretary, the SNP Government has been repeatedly warned about the perfect storm in NHS Grampian. Wherever you look, from waiting times to ambulance turnaround times, NHS Grampian is on its knees. And it's little wonder when it has the lowest bed base in the whole of Scotland. A decade of chronic underfunding has put unsustainable pressure on NHS staff, and there are huge implications for patient safety. Just this week, frontline workers raised the alarm in the Press and Journal about patients dying and getting harmed because ambulances are still queuing for hours at a time outside Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. Does the Cabinet Secretary finally accept that his government has shortchanged NHS Grampian for years?
Cabinet Secretary.
No, I don't. In 25-26, health boards will receive increased investment in their baseline funding, totalling £16.2 billion, with NHS Grampian receiving over £1.34 billion. NHS Grampian is receiving a 3% baseline uplift of £39.2 million. It represents a 0.6% real terms increase compared to 24-25. The NRAC formula is an objective measure of the need for healthcare services across Scotland, and the approach taken by the Scottish Government has been to move boards towards NRAC parity, and the NHS Grampian's £800,000 share of the £55 million additional parity maintains the board within 0.6% of NRAC parity, and it's quite something for Ms White to raise funding of our public services when her party wants to take £1 billion out of public investment in Scotland.
Tess White.
Cabinet Secretary, Presiding Officer, this is not about POPs. The deepening crisis in NHS Grampian isn't just about board meetings and balance sheets. It's about people. A mother in her mid-70s, herself a nurse by profession, had a bad fall after her husband spoke to NHS 24 and called 999. An ambulance was eventually dispatched. He was advised the wait would be 4 to 8 hours. As she was drifting in and out of consciousness, her family took the really difficult decision to lift her and drive to Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. Tragically, after they arrived, they were told she would soon pass. Her family is shocked and massively traumatised by what happened, but above all, they're haunted by what happened and how it happened. We've had enough of the Cabinet Secretary's excuses. He needs to know just how bad it is on the ground so that families aren't asking the same difficult questions. So my ask, Cabinet Secretary, not just to do visits that are pre-arranged, will you please do a shift with an ambulance crew in Grampian and see it for yourself? And that's a shift that interfaces with accident and emergency. Thank you.
Always through the chair, please, members. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First of all, I have shadowed frontline shifts, not in NHS Grampian, I accept, but I have shadowed shifts, so I can see what the situation is like for those serving our public services on the front line in health and social care. The second point that I make is in response to the constituency representation that Ms White makes there, and she paints an unacceptable picture for that family and for those that are served by NHS Grampian in terms of some of the pressures that have been set. And I declare an interest as having family member living in Grampian served by NHS Grampian, and we all have a personal vested interest in making sure that our public services work well, which is exactly why we've escalated NHS Grampian to level 4 and why we continue to provide that additional support and scrutiny.
I call Jackie Dunbar.
Can the Cabinet Secretary advise what support is provided to the Board of NHS Grampian at level 4 of the escalation framework? And can he also advise when the Board will set out a recovery plan to deliver an improved position with that support?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer, and I thank Jackie Dunbar for her question. Escalation to stage 4 of the framework brings enhanced scrutiny and support from the Government, and we will work with the Board to ensure sustained improvement. Action taken and any support provided at level 4 is tailored to the circumstances and will take account of the context in each case. NHS Grampian will receive a tailored package of support as a result of the escalation to stage 4, starting with the diagnostic report being delivered by the external consultancy. We expect the report to be delivered in June and set out key areas of focus for the Board to improve sustainability. A more detailed, tailored support package will be designed based on the recommendations of the report, and NHS Grampian's financial recovery plan will be provided to the Scottish Government in the 7th of June, with the external diagnostic being delivered later in June. This will allow the diagnostic report to verify or improve upon Grampian's financial forecasts.
Michael Mara.
In a briefing on 7th of March, the leadership of NHS Grampian informed MSPs the Health Board was projecting a £68 million deficit in 25-26. That was to be submitted to the Minister on the 17th of March. So the Health Secretary has known about the extent of the deficit for 2 months. So what has triggered the escalation of NHS Grampian to stage 4 now? Do those figures remain the same? What has changed?
Cabinet Secretary.
Michael Mara rightly points to the financial position, which is one of the primary considerations, and we want to make sure that as quickly as possible the Board have a grip upon the financial position. That's why we're sending in the external consultants. That's why there is additional Scottish Government support so that we can get a handle on the financial position in NHS Grampian, and also so that we can get an assurance that in any savings that are being required to be made, it will not impact on frontline services, but will contribute to an improvement in the position of service delivery within Grampian.
Douglas Lumsden.
Thank you, President Officer. I fully support the escalation to level 4. I called it during a members' debate just 2 weeks ago. 2 months ago, I asked the Cabinet Secretary if he had confidence in the Board. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary today if he has confidence in the Chair of NHS Grampian?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. I call Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Pregnant women, people waiting for surgery, cancer patients, people across my constituency rely on NHS Grampian. What reassurances can the Cabinet Secretary give that these stage 4 measures will not negatively impact patients from Shetland who have to access NHS Grampian services?
Cabinet Secretary.
I readily recognise the situation that Beatrice Wishart reflects, as indeed her colleague in front, Liam MacArthur, also has interaction, his constituents have interaction with NHS Grampian, and we will be working, my officials, the consultancy, in terms of getting NHS Grampian to a more sustainable financial position, and in terms of improved service delivery, to ensure that those residents of Grampian, as well as Beatrice Wishart's constituents and Liam MacArthur's constituents, can see an improvement in service and financial sustainability.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I welcome the escalation to level 4 of the framework. And I certainly welcome the support that the Cabinet Secretary will put into NHS Grampian. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if those that are going in to help NHS Grampian will take a look at the excessive bureaucracy that exists within the organisation, in my opinion, to ensure that that is eradicated so that folk can do their level best for patients?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I thank Kevin Stewart for his question, recognise the considerable contribution that he has been making in this regard over recent months, and I am clear that my officials and those supporting NHS Grampian should be looking at all possible options that can see an improvement in the financial position and an improvement in service delivery. I reiterate the point that I made at the outset of my first answer, which is that the staff at NHS Grampian are doing an incredible job in challenging circumstances to deliver for people across Grampian and indeed Orkney and Shetland. That is recognised, and I want to enable them to go even further.
Jackie Bailey.
In April, NHS Grampian warned that the Health Board has too few acute hospital beds and too few staff in some key service areas to cope with demand, and that there is not enough funding or physical space to make any significant improvement. What assurances can the SNP government give that moving to level 4 will see patients in Grampian getting the treatment they need?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Jackie Bailey for that question, because it recognises what is at the heart of this escalation, which is about improvement of service and financial sustainability within Grampian, with a view to patient services being improved. That is why we have escalated the board to level 4. So the decisions and the options that come through from the support package and the increased scrutiny is all about making sure that the patient experience is improved and that we see services delivered in a more sustainable way to make sure we satisfy Jackie Bailey's concerns.
Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you. A letter from Alan Gray, Director of Health and Social Care Finance, confirmed that brokerage would not be available for 25-26 and that NHS boards would be expected to work towards a break-even trajectory in their 3-year financial plans. If a break-even isn't possible and no deficit is permitted, how much flexibility is there in brokerage repayments, and will government consider a different funding formula for some of these NHS boards that are struggling?
As the question relates to the substantive question.
So in terms of NHS Grampian, they have been provided with brokerage on 2 consecutive years, and I think everybody has been able to see publicly the scrutiny that has been put upon that. I'm clear that I want boards, all boards, to move to a break-even position as quickly as possible. There are more that are in that position than there have been in the past. Grampian is in a position of particular difficulty, and that's why we're putting the support and scrutiny in order to turn that around. But clearly, as I've set out, we are looking to that financial sustainability to happen, not to the detriment of frontline services, and that's why we need to provide that additional support through level 4 escalation.
Thank you. That concludes topical questions. The next item of business is a debate on motion 17416 in the name of Liam MacArthur on assisted dying for terminally ill adults Scotland Bill at stage 1. I'd be grateful if members who wish to speak in the debate were to press their request to speak buttons now. And I call on Liam MacArthur, the member in charge of the bill, to speak to and move the motion.
Presiding Officer, thank you. Almost 4 years on from announcing my intention to bring forward a bill to allow terminally ill, competent adults the choice of an assisted death, Parliament finally has the chance to debate and vote on the general principles of that bill. I confess I don't recall having felt this nervous since I gave my maiden speech in 2007, not because this will be by some margin the longest contribution I have ever made in this chamber over 18 years as an MSP, although that is indeed a thought, but because I know how much this bill matters to those dying Scots and their families who are desperate to see the law changed to allow more choice, compassion and dignity at the end of life. And it's their voices, their needs, their interests that must be at the centre of this debate, at the heart of our considerations and at the forefront of our minds as we come to vote later on this evening. I know there are colleagues across this chamber who feel conflicted, who are wrestling with many profound, complex and sensitive issues and who are anxious about not being seen to make the wrong decision. That is entirely understandable. But the decision we're being asked to make here is not on the final bill, it's on the general principles of the potential change in the law and whether Parliament should be given more time to see if it can agree a bill that commands majority support. If you simply believe that change should not happen on the basis of faith or whatever other reason, I regret but respect that. However, if you accept that the current ban on assisted dying is resulting in too many bad deaths, traumatising patients as well as family and friends left behind, if you recognise that legal uncertainty is placing patients, families and medics in an invidious position, if you believe in the principle of allowing dying Scots more choice and control over the way in which they die, even if you feel my bill needs amended and safeguards strengthened, then you must vote to allow Parliament the opportunity to consider amendments. If at stage 3 you remain unpersuaded, you are free to vote down this bill. But it's surely not tenable for Parliament, once again, to say that this is all too difficult and to refuse to undertake the work required to see if a bill that commands majority support and public confidence can be agreed. Before turning to the substance of what is in and not in my bill, let me first recognise the contributions of some of those who've helped get it to this point. To my staff, past and present, who have performed heroics over the past 4 years, doing much of the heavy lifting. So to the campaign groups Dignity in Dying, Friends at the End and Humanist Society Scotland, who have been magnificent in their support, and I refer members to my register of interest, as well as the detailed declaration I made to the Finance and Health Committees when giving evidence. My thanks also go to the Non-Government Bills Unit, along with apologies for only belatedly coming to realise that they are a hidden gem in the way that this Parliament operates. I thank all the stakeholder groups and individuals here and overseas in jurisdictions where assisted dying laws are operating safely and successfully, who have spared time to share with me their thoughts, insights and expertise. Too many to mention, but all have been invaluable in informing my understanding of assisted dying and the end-of-life care more widely. And to the committees, particularly the Health Committee, which I know was inundated with evidence, written and oral, but has worked its way through that and come forward with a report which I think is detailed, thorough and balanced, and I think they are owed a debt of gratitude. Colleagues around this chamber too, who have been generous in taking time to speak to me over the past 4 years. I've come to recognise the look of mild terror in the eyes of colleagues as I saunter into the canteen or the coffee lounge, as it suddenly becomes clear that a short chat on assisted dying is now unavoidable. It's no coincidence, I think, that invitations to parties have rather dried up over the past 4 years. But whatever views colleagues may have, those discussions have never been anything other than respectful and considered, and I am so grateful. I'm confident too that this afternoon's debate will be conducted in the same measured and respectful manner, doing justice to the seriousness and sensitivity of the issue, but reflecting also the fact that whatever our respective views on whether to allow for a choice of an assisted death, we all come from the same place of wanting to reduce suffering and protect the vulnerable. So what will the bill do? It will, as I said, allow terminally ill mentally competent adults in Scotland a choice to be provided with assistance for them to end their own life and avoid potentially painful and distressing death. It's a choice that for so long, so many of our constituents have asked us to provide clearly and safely in Scots law. It's a choice they see available now to over 300 million people and rising around the world. And no two assisted dying laws are the same, but the model I'm proposing reflects one legally available across Australia, in New Zealand and in many US states. Closer to home, it's recently been legislated for in the Isle of Man, is being progressed in Jersey and is currently being debated at Westminster, where a bill applying to England and Wales will have its third reading in the Commons on Friday. We can learn from this international experience, but need to get the detail right, reflecting our own circumstances, legal framework and health and care arrangements. My bill sets out strict eligibility criteria and processes for multiple assessments, including specialist referrals if necessary. It contains what I believe are appropriate safeguards which balance this tightly controlled option and access, and includes requirements on data gathering, reporting and review to ensure proper oversight. To access assistance, you must be aged 16 or over, resident and have lived in Scotland for at least 12 months, and registered with a GP in Scotland. Assessment would be required by at least 2 doctors acting independently of each other, who would need to be satisfied that an individual had a terminal illness, be sufficiently mentally capable and be acting on their own free will without being coerced or pressured. And I'll take an intervention from Liam Kerr.
Liam Kerr.
I'm very grateful to the member for bringing this forward and for laying it out in detail, but many constituents have raised with me that the definition of terminal illness could be seen as too broad or too vague. How does the member respond to that challenge, and what might happen as the bill progresses?
Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank Liam Kerr for that intervention? And he is correct in that concerns have been raised about this in some quarters. I have to say the evidence given to the Health Committee from the likes of the Royal College of GPs and other medical bodies was more relaxed about the definition, but I think there's an opportunity at stages 2 and 3 to further tighten that up, or indeed to recognise where, in terms of secondary legislation, further clarity can be provided. An individual would have to be made aware of all the treatment options available to ensure any decision is fully informed, and there would be time periods for reflection and consideration. Having been deemed eligible, there would be no requirement to act on that decision within a specific timeframe. Indeed, we see in jurisdictions around the world, around a third of those who successfully apply for an assisted death do not ultimately end up using it. Often it's enough to know the option is there should it be needed, allowing the dying person peace of mind to get on with getting the most out of the rest of their life. Should a person wish to proceed, however, the medication would be prescribed by a pharmacist and delivered by a medical professional who would check capacity and intent and remain present. It would then require to be self-administered by the individual. Whilst there is clearly overwhelming public support for a change in the law across Scotland, throughout Stage 1 I've engaged with and listened closely to those with concerns. I've reflected, for example, on concerns regarding the minimum age threshold, and I'm persuaded of the case for amending the bill at Stage 2 to raise this to 18. Concerns have also been raised by some disability groups and campaigners about the impact they say this bill would have on efforts to improve the rights and lives of those in the disability community. I've taken those concerns seriously from the outset and done my best to engage, and at this point I would pay tribute to Pam Duncan-Glancy for the time that she spared me to discuss the issues. I know we are fundamentally arriving at different points, but I have been enormously grateful for her insights. I know from family experience that for many in the disability community, they face discrimination in a society that too often devalues them. Disability campaigners who wrote to MSPs last week agree, pointing out it is unacceptable that people with disabilities continue to face social stigma, inequalities and inadequate support, including at the end of life. These problems need urgent attention. But they go on to say, however, it would be a mistake to conclude that we should oppose legalising assisted dying for terminally ill people until those wider problems are fixed. It's paternalistic to imply that reducing choices will resolve inequalities. Denying dying Scots more choice will not enhance the lives of those with a disability, nor do I believe would it be acceptable for a person with a disability who meets the eligibility criteria under my bill to be denied the same choice as anyone else. And I give way to the Cabinet Secretary.
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Liam MacArthur for taking the intervention the way that he is setting out his introductory points. Can I ask two practical questions? The first is around how he envisages the service to be delivered. Does he expect it to be as available in his constituency in Orkney as it would be in my Airdrie Shotts constituency, or for it to be more centrally operated? And secondly, how will he envisage accounting for those with fluctuating capacity in terms of determining their decision-making?
Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for those questions? Again, questions that were raised with the Health Committee during evidence. I think in terms of the delivery of this, there's been much discussion about whether you would have an opt-in or an opt-out model of care. I'm reasonably relaxed, but we'd need to understand how an opt-in model might work. But in terms of its delivery around the country, as happens with health and care across the board at the moment, that is delivered in a way that meets the needs and circumstances of different parts of the country. And that, I think, would be a decision for the respective health boards working alongside partners to decide how best to deliver. In terms of fluctuating capacity, I think there are questions around capacity as a whole. It's an issue I know that the medical profession are wrestling with pretty much consistently at the moment. And any legislation ultimately would need to reflect that. But as I say, there would need to be a determination that there was the capacity to understand the consequences that the decision was made, not just at the point at which the request was made, but at the point at which medication was provided. So if there are additional safeguards that it is felt is necessary to ensure that that happens and that individuals have the protection that they need, but that access is available, I'm open to looking at those. Importantly, there appears to be the view of a sizable majority within the disability community, which polls confirm support a change in the law every bit as strongly as the population as a whole. That said, I'm committed to continuing to engage with Ms Duncan Glancy and, if they wish, the three groups who have been most vocal in their opposition to see what might be done at stage 2 to allay those concerns as far as possible. But I urge colleagues, I certainly will.
Pam Duncan Glancy.
I thank the member for taking that intervention, and I appreciate the comments that he's put on the record about the way in which the debate has been conducted, and I thank him too for the respect that he's afforded all views on this. Can I ask if the member would accept that on the surface, when you first ask people, including disabled people, about assisted dying, and they consider it to be about choice, but once you start to answer some questions about what it could include, about whether it is about real choice, people believe in some ways that it's about the withdrawal of care. Some other people believe it's about palliative care. This is about neither of those. This is, of course, about assisting someone to take their own life. And when that is explained, the majority of people don't support it.
Liam MacArthur.
Look, I thank Pam Duncan Glancy for that, intervention. I don't think that is the case. I think polling consistently shows that support, not just in the population at large, but across the disability community as well. That's not to say that there isn't a very real need to open up that discussion to answer the questions that people have. There are those who have a firm view in support, those who have a firm view in opposition, but many simply have questions about the practicalities of how this might work in practice, as the Cabinet Secretary was just raising. But I think looking at the findings of Glasgow University, Professor Ben Coleman's research of the way in which these laws work in practice around the world, there is no evidence that assisted dying laws harm people with disabilities, undermine access to healthcare, or promote disrespect towards people with disabilities. But I will continue to engage with Pam Duncan Glancy at stage 2, stage 3, if we have the opportunity to address any other concerns. Turning to the definition of terminal illness that Liam Kerr mentioned, the bill requires a person to have an illness, disease or condition which is worsening and will continue to worsen, and that is at an advanced stage. The illness must be one a person will not recover from and which is expected to result in their early death. I don't believe the definition should include a specific period of life expectancy, and note the committee agreed. I remain confident the definition gives clear effect to the policy intent, which is to cover terminally ill adults in the final stages of their illness. But these and other aspects, as I mentioned to Liam Kerr following his introduction, are matters for debate and amendments at stages 2 and 3. And to those who argue that we should be focused solely on improving palliative care, I would make the point that it's not a case of either or. We need both. Investing in improved quality of and access to palliative and hospice care, as well as good social care, is imperative. It will be what the vast majority of dying Scots continue to rely on, even after any change in the law. But we know there are those who find themselves beyond the reach of palliative care and who are desperate for more choice. We know too that in jurisdictions with assisted dying laws in place, not only has this often gone hand in hand with increased investment, but also, as the committee heard, an improved understanding of and engagement with palliative care. So, as I say, we can and must do both, and I pay tribute to the work particularly of Miles Brigg in this area. And on the question of legislative competence, my view has not changed since introduction, when, after careful consideration and with advice from legal officers, I signed a statement of competence, a view shared by you, Presiding Officer. Should Parliament back the general principles this evening, though, I will engage with the Scottish and UK governments and seek to facilitate discussions to ensure the will of this Parliament can indeed be delivered. I echo the committee's report in welcoming the Scottish Government's commitment to that, should the bill pass at stage 1, to open dialogue with the UK Government and keep this Parliament updated. Today we can take a significant step forwards, giving terminally ill adults in Scotland, across Scotland, more choice. It's a brave step, yes, but it's a compassionate one, and it's a step I believe Scotland is ready to take. As well as international evidence, my bill draws on understanding gained from previous attempts to change the law, led by colleagues including Jeremy Purvis, Patrick Harvey and the late Margot MacDonald. 15 years ago, Margot MacDonald stood in this chamber speaking in the Stage 1 debate on her end-of-life assistant bill and said, "We, the Parliament that represents the wishes, beliefs, hopes and determination of our fellow countrymen and women, are doing something today that Parliaments are meant to do. We're trying to find an honourable, fair and equitable solution to a problem." 15 years on, Margot's words remain pertinent. In bringing my remarks to a close, as I said at the outset, it's the voices of dying Scots and their families that must be at the heart of today's debate. So let me quote Annie from North Uist, who was diagnosed with MND in 2022. "I'm not afraid to die. I want to live. I want my life to continue. But right now, I'm living with extreme anxiety about suffering. If I had the right to choose what is best for me, I could let go of all that anxiety and fear. For me, assisted dying is, funnily enough, a lifeline. I could let go of the sleepless nights, stress-filled days, and constant anxiety-ridden thoughts." The words of Annie show there are consequences too to not changing the law. The horrendous decisions and bad deaths faced by dying Scots. The trauma for them and those left behind. The higher suicide rates we see amongst those with a terminal illness, and those spending their life savings to go to Dignitas earlier than necessary and far from home at the end. But those are questions for another day, another debate, for stage 3 when the final detail of this bill is known. For now, Presiding Officer, what colleagues have been asked to do is back the general principles to allow this bill to go forward for further scrutiny and amendment. In the context of the stories we are hearing ever more often, ever more loudly, ever more painfully from our constituents, that is surely not an unreasonable ask to make. We can't continue to leave this in the too difficult box. Presiding Officer, that would be unforgivable. And I move that Parliament agrees the general principles of the Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adults Scotland Bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I now call on Claire Haughey on behalf of the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As the convener of the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee, I am pleased to speak today to our Stage 1 report on the Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adults Scotland Bill. Starting with 2 calls for views that ran over July and August last year, the committee has undertaken detailed scrutiny of this bill at Stage 1 over a period of 10 months. We have listened carefully to strongly held views from those who support assisted dying and from those who are opposed. We have gathered detailed evidence on all aspects of the bill, and I'd like to start by placing on record the committee's sincere thanks to all those who contributed to our scrutiny of the bill at Stage 1 from all sides of the debate. From the outset, this Parliament has been in agreement that the sensitive topic of assisted dying should be treated as a matter of conscience. And in recognition of this, the committee has decided to make no overall recommendation on the general principles of the bill at Stage 1. Instead, we have highlighted a number of key considerations for members in deciding how they choose to vote today. We have looked carefully at those human rights under European Convention on Human Rights that may be affected by the bill. These include the right to life under Article 2, the right to respect for private life under Article 8 and the prohibition of discrimination under Article 14. In this context, members will need to consider how likely or serious a risk they think there might be that a human rights-based legal challenge could result in the scope of eligibility for assisted dying being expanded over time, contrary to the original intentions behind the bill. In deciding how to vote, members will equally need to judge for themselves whether they think the bill strikes an appropriate balance between providing a right for terminally ill adults to access assisted dying whilst giving adequate protections to vulnerable groups. As part of its scrutiny, the committee took evidence on the related issue of palliative care, and we heard how important good quality palliative care is for people approaching the ends of their lives. No matter how the Parliament votes on this bill today, it is to be hoped that the current debate will provide a catalyst for further improvements to be made to the quality and availability of palliative care services in Scotland. If the bill progresses to Stage 2, we have suggested that the safeguards in the bill and its compliance with human rights requirements could be strengthened. That could take the form of amendments that establish an independent oversight mechanism, such as an independent review panel, or that creating a potential monitoring role for the Chief Medical Officer. We have looked carefully at the eligibility criteria for assisted dying set out in the bill, and on balance we are satisfied with Mr MacArthur's rationale for not including a timescale for life expectancy in the definition of terminal illness, and to leave individual decisions on eligibility to clinical judgment. But we do think certain of the criteria, specifically in relation to minimum age and residency, may benefit from further consideration and clarification should the bill progress to stage 2. In this context, I note Mr MacArthur's recent comments. At stage 2, he would wish to propose to amend the minimum age threshold for eligibility for assisted dying from 16 to 18. And I should note that this remains an area where the committee would wish to undertake further engagement prior to formal stage 2 proceedings taking place. Also worthy of further consideration at stage 2 are the detail of those provisions related to capacity, specifically the resource implications for the medical professions of assessing capacity, ensuring the capacity of people with a mental disorder is assessed in a way that is fair and non-discriminatory, whilst also giving suitable protection for vulnerable adults, and defining how eligibility for assisted dying will be determined for those with fluctuating capacity. We heard a range of views from healthcare professionals about the way assisted dying would be delivered in practice were the bill to become law. And we recognise Mr MacArthur's intention that assisted dying should be delivered via a service model that enables integration with existing services rather than being provided as a standalone service. If it becomes law, we think it will be important to monitor the impact of the bill on existing healthcare services over time. And if the bill progresses to stage 2, we believe it may be appropriate to explore through amendments whether specific aspects of assisted dying would be better delivered on a standalone basis. In particular, this may be considered necessary to ensure consistent access across the country, including in rural, remote areas and the islands. The committee has heard evidence of significant discrepancies in estimates of training costs associated with the bill. These costs may also vary significantly according to a number of factors. Whatever the costs of training ultimately prove to be should the bill become law, we would expect the Scottish Government to set out how it intends to meet them in a way that does not negatively affect available funding for existing services. We welcome Liam MacArthur's preparedness to consider further those sections of the bill that relate to the provision of assistance. The evidence submitted to the committee has led us to conclude that those provisions of the bill concerning self-administration and provision of assistance will require further clarification should the bill progress to stage 2. Whether through amendments or more detailed guidance, further clarity will be essential to ensuring all parties involved are suitably protected should the bill become law. The committee has concluded that the wording of the conscientious objection clause in the bill will require further attention at stage 2 to ensure it provides an appropriate level of legal clarity and certainty for all parties involved in the assisted dying process. Some stakeholders have called for the bill to include a no-duty clause, meaning that healthcare practitioners who decide to exercise a conscientious objection would be under no obligation to refer an individual requesting assisted dying to a healthcare colleague able to deal with their request. However, we have also heard concerns that the inclusion of such a clause could create unreasonable barriers to access to assisted dying. Where healthcare professionals or practitioners exercise a conscientious objection, we have concluded that there should be a minimum expectation that they will refer patients requested assisted dying onto a colleague who does not share such an objection. As a bare minimum, they should be expected to provide additional information about the process. We believe the potential inclusion of a no detriment clause would merit further investigation at stage 2, and this could help to protect healthcare staff from potential workplace discrimination if they decide to be involved in assisted dying, or equally if they decide to exercise a conscientious objection in order not to be involved. And we have noted Mr MacArthur's willingness to explore further the possibility of creating an opt-in model of participation in assisted dying for health practitioners, and this may merit further examination via amendments at stage 2. Irrespective of whatever position the Parliament takes in allowing or prohibiting institutional objection, we believe amendments will be needed should the bill progress to stage 2 to provide further clarity so institutions understand how they will be permitted to act should the bill become law. And we have taken a particular interest in potential alternative models for assessing coercion, such as that created in relation to living donors by the Human Tissue Act 2004. And we believe such alternative models should be explored further via amendments should the bill progress to stage 2. We welcome Mr MacArthur's preparedness, should the bill be approved at stage 1, to consider mechanisms for reviewing and updating guidance on coercion, and this will ensure health practitioners are suitably equipped to assess coercion effectively and to allow the related offence created by Section 21 of the bill to be appropriately policed. There has been a good deal of commentary on those provisions within the bill that may be judged to extend beyond the legislative competence of the Scottish Parliament. Mr MacArthur has acknowledged the constraints this will place on the full implementation of the bill until these issues of legislative competence have been resolved, and that will require an open dialogue to take place between the Scottish Government and the UK Government with a view to reaching an agreed solution. I should add that many stakeholders have also emphasised that it will take time for a workable solution to these matters to be agreed and implemented. Nonetheless, our report welcomes the Scottish Government's commitment to enter into a dialogue with the UK Government should the bill progress, and to keep Parliament regularly updated on progress. If the bill does progress, its information reporting and review provisions are going to be particularly important, and our report has highlighted a number of areas that will require further reflection at stage 2 should the general principles of the bill be approved today. These include the information that is required to be collected as part of the review process, whether 5 years is an appropriate review period for the bill, and whether the bill should include a sunset clause, meaning the legislation could not remain in force beyond a defined period without a further vote in Parliament. In conclusion, I wish to reiterate my sincere thanks to all those who contributed to the committee's scrutiny of this bill at stage 1, be that by submitting written evidence, giving oral evidence, participating in informal engagement, or contributing personal testimonies of their lived experience. And I also want to put on record my thanks to committee clerks for their work on this scrutiny, and to SPICE colleagues for their assistance to the committee. The committee has very deliberately not made an overall recommendation on the general principles of the bill, out of respect for Parliament's desire to approach the issue of assisted dying as a matter of individual conscience. However, in presenting the evidence we have gathered during our careful scrutiny of the bill at stage 1, I hope the committee has made a positive and useful contribution to today's important debate, and that the contents of our report will be helpful to individual members in deciding how they vote on the bill today and informing further scrutiny of the bill should it progress to stage 2.
Thank you. We move to the open debate, and I call Neil Gray to be followed by Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Firstly, I want to extend my thanks to Liam MacArthur for bringing forward this bill. I think everyone, regardless of personal view on the bill, would agree that Mr MacArthur has undertaken careful and considered work on this complex, sensitive and emotive topic. This debate is one of the most significant that we have faced over the course of this Parliament, and a matter of conscience for colleagues across the chamber. As you'll be aware, Presiding Officer, the colleagues will be wrestling with their individual consciences today, recognising that there is no inconsequential choice before us today. And the Government has taken a neutral position on the bill at this stage, a decision I outlined in my memorandum to the committee last year. As the Government's lead minister for the bill, I feel it is important that I reflect the Scottish Government's position, and so, after careful consideration, I have taken the decision to abstain today. I've paid close attention to the committee's evidence gathering, and before addressing the recommendations in their Stage 1 report, I would like to pay tribute to the committee for their diligent scrutiny. While committee members will of course have their own personal views, they have put those to one side, listened dispassionately to the evidence and produced a sensitive and well-crafted report to assist MSPs in their deliberations. I thank members of the committee, those that gave evidence, the clerks, for the service they have given to us all. The committee's recommendations included areas such as considering how the bill would interact with all other key aspects of end-of-life provision, and consulting with specialist bodies to ensure that capacity provisions within the bill are fair, do not discriminate and offer protection to vulnerable groups. Whilst I, on behalf of the Government, will remain neutral at this stage of the bill's process, should the bill pass stage 1, we will of course engage on the issues raised by the committee sensitively and constructively, and being demonstrably objective in that phase is a second explanation for my abstention today. The committee also raised the issue of legislative competence. I am pleased that Mr MacArthur has acknowledged concerns around legislative competence and has sought to propose options to remedy in his policy memorandum. I know Mr MacArthur takes the issues of competence very seriously. I give him, everyone in the Chamber, my commitment that should the bill pass stage 1, the Government will consider his proposals carefully and decide the best route forward. I would also like to reflect upon the recommendation concerning end-of-life care. Whilst I do not wish to conflate matters, knowing that palliative care can benefit people for many years and not just at the end of life, it is important to restate our commitment to ensuring everyone who needs it can access well-coordinated, timely and high-quality palliative care and care around dying. That commitment remains paramount regardless of the outcome of today's vote. There is not a choice of one or the other before us today, rather a decision upon the principle of assisted dying. We are currently finalising the consultation analysis report on our draft strategy, Palliative Care Matters to All, and will publish the final strategy and delivery plan this summer. The draft strategy focused on deliverable outcomes and actions that will help people in all ages get access to high-quality palliative care services wherever they may be. It also focused on ensuring our public services are sustainable, person-centred and effective, particularly as the need for palliative care increases in years to come. The feedback from the consultation showed strong support for this person-centred approach, and this will be reflected in the final strategy. Palliative care delivered well can reduce hospital admissions and unnecessary treatment whilst improving outcomes for patients, and that's why we want to see those with responsibility for planning and delivery of health and care services prioritising and investing some of the record £21.7 billion that we have put into health and social care services this year into palliative care. However, we know that funding in isolation is not enough. We need everyone in Scotland to feel empowered to talk about living and dying well and to understand what services are available to them when they need them. Whether or not we as individuals support the principles of this bill, we should be grateful for the spotlight this debate has put on palliative care. And I would like to take this opportunity to put on record my gratitude to the NHS staff, the hospice staff, community and social care and general practice staff who provide palliative care services across Scotland. They do a remarkable job. And in closing, Presiding Officer, I will give way.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for taking that intervention. I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary could set out that if this bill were to pass, from where in the budget for the health service, the budget to provide the additional training and the additional support that would be required should this bill pass.
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Pam Duncan-Glancy for that question. This was something that came up during the scrutiny during the committee stage. Other than to say that we believe that there will be a cost, and that cost has not been fully factored in, that will be a decision for Government that we will look to depending on the progress of this bill, and is not one that we have a view upon at this stage of proceedings. In closing, I want to thank everyone in the Chamber for the way in which members have handled the discussion around assisted dying thus far. I know the debate here today will continue to be conducted with similar sensitivity and respect. And irrespective of the outcome of this vote, we must use this momentum to ensure that Scotland is a place in which we can have open, honest and supportive conversations about living and dying well. But also, Presiding Officer, given the deeply held views in here and amongst our constituents, to return to the point I made earlier about the consequential choices we have before us, whichever way Parliament votes this evening, we must show leadership to those whose views will not have been reflected in Parliament's decision, to provide reassurance, support and clarity. Regardless of the position taken by Parliament today, I intend to do what I can as quickly as possible from the Government's perspective to provide just that.
Thank you. And I call Edward Mountain to be followed by Daniel Johnson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I stand to speak in this debate with sadness. Sadness because it's all about the ending of life. Presiding Officer, during life there will never be ever a bigger decision to make than the decision to either take a life or to sanction the ending of life. As a young soldier, my view was death happened to other people. But age and cancer have made me realise that death was inevitably coming closer. And I was forced to contemplate carefully how my life might end. Not a comfortable or easy experience, and this bill brings all of that into sharp focus. I speak without any religious beliefs, but as a son, husband and father, and hopefully soon to be a grandfather. These are the things that drive me to ensure that what we do is right and why I will always seek life. Now, I've attended many of the pro-assisted dying meetings, listening to why some people believe that they have the right to choose how and when they die. Let's be clear, knowing that when you have a terminal illness, that you will automatically have access to the best palliative care is fundamental to feeling in control of your illness. It gives you options, which is why I support Miles Briggs's bill to ensure the provision of proper palliative care. Indeed, my opinion is that the proper palliative care was one of the key reasons why previous assisted dying bills fell. If one doesn't know that you have control, then there's no doubt that you will look to getting control, and that is inevitably what will drive some people to support the bill. That, to my mind, is a form of coercion. Now, whilst this bill attempts to prevent all types of coercion, I believe it fails. Presiding Officer, I believe there are three types of coercion: active, passive and state coercion. Whilst the bill may try to prevent open and active coercion, it does nothing to prevent passive coercion. The lack of sufficient palliative care will make people think that the potential cost of their private medical care and that every penny they spend on that care is one less for their family. This therefore becomes a mix of passive and state coercion, as indeed was the imposition, in my opinion, of the family farm tax. If you died quickly enough, then you could give your farm to your family tax-free, thus inviting an early death, transforming the right to die into a duty to die, and then it becomes truly unacceptable. Presiding Officer, this bill ensures that the NHS medical practitioner who delivers the yet unspecified mix of drugs to the patient will remain with that person until they die. And we don't know what drugs, but what we do know is that there are no available drugs yet that have an on-label use to cause death. And if they were, they would be used in countries that approve of the death penalty. So the unapproved mixture will need to be accompanied by a strong anti-nausea drugs. And I can vouch that some of these are not invaluable. Sorry, yes, I will give way to Dr. Allen.
Alistair Allen.
For giving way. I suspect he's coming to this point, but despite the many impassioned and sincere cases that have been made and will be made today, is one of the issues with this legislation, in his view, not that the bill doesn't specify the substance concerned and leaves this to ministers?
Edward Mountain.
I think the bill doesn't do it because it's not known what substances are available, and some of the more effective substances are no longer produced, and I think that causes a problem. And I will, to Mr MacArthur, if I have time, Presiding Officer.
Liam MacArthur.
I'd very much welcome Edward Mountain taking the intervention. Just by wanting to clarity, one would not expect medication to be put on the face of the bill, and in terms of legislative competence, it would be inappropriate to set that detail out in the bill. That detail will have to come in due course, but I assure Mr Mountain and indeed Dr Allen that there is no indication the medications used in places like Australia or New Zealand have caused any problem whatsoever.
Edward Mountain.
Well, I understand why the drugs won't be put on the face of the bill, but what we do know is that evidence from Canada has proven that no drugs are 100% guarantee or 100% pain-free and necessarily quick. Now, Presiding Officer, I know my time is running short and there are many matters that are still not to be addressed, such as the competence of the bill, who should be eligible, and I understand Mr MacArthur has said that 16-year-olds should no longer be, but the plethora of amendments that have been identified by the committee in the Stage 1 report, and the many areas that Liam MacArthur himself accepts will need to be amended. All of these and my specific concerns tell me the bill should stop here and should never progress until we are sure that everyone is able to get palliative care so that they are not coerced into opting to end their life. And I simply close this debate, my side of the debate this afternoon, Presiding Officer, by saying I can't support this bill. This Parliament, in my mind, has a duty to make it easier to choose life rather than making it easier to die, which is what this bill will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call Daniel Johnson to be followed by Rona Mackay?
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and it's a great privilege to follow Edward Mountain. I'd first like to begin by addressing my remarks to my constituents. This is a debate unlike any other. It's a free vote, but also the importance of this debate means that I'd just like to say to them that I take my responsibilities very seriously, and my position this evening reflects both the broad views communicated to me over my time as an MSP since 2016, which have broadly been in favour, but also those which have been more critical, particularly the balance in recent weeks and at the event that I held last week in my constituency. But I do believe that society's views have changed, that this is an important moment for Parliament to discuss this, and we should try as best we can to form a settled view. And above all else, I think we need to do so on the basis of principles, which is why this evening I will vote for it at stage 1, but I will reserve my position because I do have a number of concerns which I will set out. But to those principles, I have found myself reflecting when I have observed friends and family members facing their final moments of life. Should they have this option? And I've thought to myself, if I've seen them face their end of their life, what would I want? Should we be giving people the choice, while capacity, capability, opportunity are being removed from them, this final piece of control, this final element of decision-making over their lives? My answer to that basic fundamental principle is yes. Now, you can call that bodily autonomy, decision-making of the individual, but fundamentally it boils down to that. Would you want that choice? Would you want that choice for others? It's not to say that it needs to be taken, but should it be there? I also, in facing these matters, think about the harm principle, which is that the only purpose which people can be prevented from doing things is the degree to which it causes harm to others. And in terms of that basic act, I do not see the harm, which is why I think Parliament needs to fully consider these matters. I think it has to expose all the detail through stage 2 to challenge whether or not it can meet the concerns which I think are there. And indeed, there are wider harms that we need to consider. The pressure on the individual, potential for changed relationships, both with family members and professionals, particularly clinicians, and in terms of social outcomes, the changed expectations people might have at the end of life. But I do believe this bill, as it stands, has provisions which address some of these, but I think it perhaps could go further. For me, and this is an important point, this is about an autonomous act. The final act is one that the individual would need to take for themselves. I could not have voted for the previous bills because it was not that case. Now, I think this is important for clinical relationships. I think those are fundamentally altered if that final act is delivered by a clinician. But most importantly, it's about consent. The ability to remove one's consent, withdraw it at that final moment, can only be achieved if it's an autonomous act. But I do have concern about whether or not this element of the bill is robust. I recognise it's in the policy memorandum, but is it on the face of the bill in sufficient strength? Likewise, the definition itself around terminal illness. This is incredibly important. We have seen expansion of similar legislation in other countries. I think it is important that this is about acceleration of a process that is inevitable for the individual. I think it is important that this is not about providing death where death is not essentially there. And I think in terms of avoiding those dangerous social outcomes, those changed expectations, this definition is critical. But I do worry that in terms of the way it is framed, that there is the possibility of expansion, that the curtailment of life is not sufficiently clear, that those with long-term chronic conditions with reduced life expectancies could meet that definition. So I think that needs to be tightened up. But above all else, I think we do need to be alive to the possibility of social effects. But I think all of these things can be looked at through the parliamentary process, need to be resolved. And I'm not saying that any of these things would be necessarily sufficient conditions, but I think these are the areas that need to have the closest look. We need to have a look at the definition. I think issues such as the timing and the declaration itself, the declaration from the clinicians that they are clear that the person is free of coercion or pressure is important. And above all else, I think there being a no detriment principle both to individuals but also organisations to opt out is vitally important. In the end, I would just say it like this, that death is an inevitability for all of us. This is about providing options and control in a situation where those are being removed from people because of life itself. This is about a balance of competing but equally strong and compelling arguments. But I take this ultimate view that death in itself is not a harm, but the nature of death can be. Our decision tonight is whether or not we think we can improve those circumstances, improve the people's situation as their life comes to an end. And I know that colleagues will make the right decision based on their own consciences. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. I call Rona Mackay to be followed by Jackie Bailey. Ms Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This has been a difficult speech to write and it will be difficult to deliver. Unlike some members we may hear from in the Chamber today, I thankfully don't have personal experience of any of my loved ones suffering a bad death, but I strongly support the bill because I believe in giving terminally ill people the right to choose a dignified and peaceful death. I cannot, in good conscience, deny them that right. And I say to those conflicted on what decision to make today, you don't even have to agree or like what has been proposed in the bill, but please don't deny terminally ill people their right to choose. As co-convener of the cross-party group on end-of-life choices, this bill represents the culmination of years of meticulous research and cross-sector consultation, and I commend the Health Committee's Stage 1 report, which was fair and balanced. Presiding Officer, this bill is not a leap into the unknown. It's a cautious, evidence-based step forward. Voluntary assisted dying is grounded on international best practice, building on proven models from Australia, the United States and other jurisdictions. It's been developed through extensive consultation with experts and those with lived experience of terminal illness. The framework it proposes is safe, compassionate and practical. The decision members make today is very personal, and I respect those who find themselves with a dilemma or who feel they can't vote for the general principles. We know that voluntary assisted dying is not mandatory, but a choice, so I can only assume that opposition is based on religious conviction or the fear of coercion. So let me address that point directly. International experts, including Professor Ben White from the Australian Centre for Health Law Research, state clearly that in countries where assisted dying is legal, there is no evidence of people being coerced into choosing it. On the contrary, the evidence, and this is government data, not anecdotal, shows that families often try to dissuade loved ones from choosing assisted dying. American doctor Ryan Spielvogel, who gave evidence to the Westminster Committee, told MPs, "I've never seen even one suspected case of coercion. If anything, it's families who are not ready to let go, placing emotional roadblocks." And as an additional safeguard, this bill introduces a new criminal offence of coercion with a sentence of up to 14 years in prison, something no previous assisted dying bill in Scotland has included. Mental capacity... Yes.
John Reason.
I thank the member for giving way, and I take her point about coercion. Would you accept, though, that for some people it's not coercion, it's more that they feel a burden, and although the family might not see them as a burden, they themselves feel a burden?
Rona Mackay.
Well, I mean, that may be the case, but obviously the detail of this bill is that they have to be, there has to be two independent doctors say that they are terminally ill, and this could happen. And I don't think you can wipe out the benefits of this bill on that basis. No, I'm just going to carry on, thanks. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Yes, I'll take the intervention.
Liam MacArthur.
Would Rona Mackay accept that the issue of burden is a genuine one? It's a sentiment that is certainly keenly felt by people at the end of life. But actually, at the moment, there are no safeguards, there are no guardrails for those that feel a burden.
Rona Mackay.
Thank you for that intervention. Actually, I am coming on to that shortly. An additional safeguard, the bill introduces a new criminal offence of coercion with a sentence of up to 14 years, something no previous bill has included. Mental capacity and freedom from outside influence are confirmed at every stage, and the person can change their mind at any time. So doctors here are already trained to identify coercion in contexts such as abortion care or treatment withdrawal. That duty exists. It's not unique to this bill. It's a standard part of ethical medical practice. And it's important to understand that denying people access to voluntary assisted dying does not prevent assisted deaths. It merely pushes them underground. Dr Amanda Ward, a global expert in this field, documented in her PhD thesis numerous examples of amateur-assisted deaths in Scotland, some of them horrific. Relatives of people who help a loved one end their suffering end up in jail. Deaths occurred without any safeguards or professional support. That's the alternative to this bill, a system that fails the dying, doctors and the law. So in essence, what this bill proposes is far safer than the status quo. And on the question of palliative care, there's no conflict. It's not an either-or choice. Presiding Officer, public support for this choice is clear. Consistent polling shows a majority of Scots across all demographics support the bill. Liam MacArthur has drawn on the expertise of Scottish organisations like Friends of the Earth, End Dignity in Dying and the Humanist Society. These groups speak for thousands of their members. Their voices are not abstract. They're rooted in real grief and love, and they're united by a powerful determination to spare others the same heartbreak. We are in a fortunate position. What sets this bill apart from previous proposals is that many of the concerns historically associated with assisted dying can now be addressed with robust evidence. Nearly a decade on from our last debate, we are no longer relying on theory. We have substantial international data to inform our decision. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, it's our responsibility today to consider the general principles of this bill. It's careful, it's credible, it's compassionate, and it reflects the values of a country that believes in dignity, autonomy and evidence-led policy. We have a chance to show the Scottish Parliament at its best, progressive and profoundly compassionate. Presiding Officer, it's time. It's time to listen to the voices of dying people. Time to vote for the general principles of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Jackie Bailey to be followed by Sanders Johanny. Ms. Bailey.
Presiding Officer, this is without doubt the most difficult and sensitive debate before the Parliament in this session. And I want to pay tribute to Liam MacArthur because his handling of the bill, the respectful debate and the seriousness of his approach has been exemplary. You could not pick a better advocate for trying to bring about such a fundamental societal change. Now, I didn't support the first two bills that came before Parliament, proposed by Margaret MacDonald and Patrick Harvey. In my view, they were too wide in scope. But this bill is more focused and therefore deserves fresh consideration. I'm grateful to the Health and Sport Committee for their report and to all the organisations that provided briefings, because they were helpful in assessing the different arguments. Like most members, I have been inundated with emails from hundreds of constituents, some more than once, right up to minutes before this debate, from many medical professionals, both for and against, from a number of organisations, in many cases neutral, but sharing their concerns about the gaps in the bill and the need for further safeguards. Then there were the very personal stories of constituents. Michelle Moffat from Dumbarton, who was a former ICU nurse at the Golden Jubilee, booked an assisted suicide at a Dignitas clinic, but cancelled it. Now, some 6 years later, she is in a wheelchair, but she lives a life full and surrounded by family and friends. Or the emotional story of Julia from Cardress, who experienced the trauma of her husband trying to commit suicide on a number of occasions before finally succeeding, because he couldn't bear living any longer. Or the views of Jim Elder Woodward, who is disabled and concerned about the implications of the bill on disabled people. All of these stories weigh heavily in our decision-making. Now, I understand people wanting choice, wanting dignity and agency in their death, but I worry about the safeguards. I don't want anyone to be coerced into taking their own life. I don't want anyone to believe that they might be a burden to their family and feel a misplaced sense of duty to end their life prematurely. I worry that the medical profession is so divided and what the practical implications for the NHS will be, whether medical professionals can opt out or whether training will be given to those administering end-of-life medication. And I have no sense yet from the Scottish Government whether this can practically be delivered or the cost to the NHS. There is too much that has not yet been scrutinised, and I appreciate Liam MacArthur's willingness to consider Stage 2 amendments, but there is a lot to be changed, and this will not have the same level of scrutiny that the original bill had at Stage 1. I'm worried about unintended consequences of things we haven't even begun to consider. For example, the most recent briefing from Dr Annie Donaldson of Strathclyde University that raised the concern that abusive men would weaponise this legislation against a terminally ill partner. Now, whether that is likely or not, it was not something that I had considered in the context of this bill. Chas, based in my constituency at Robin House in Balloch, provides world-class respite and palliative care for children. They understandably believe that there should be a legal right to palliative care, and I welcome Miles Briggs' work in this area. But that even with the change in age from 16 to 18, it still brings in scope young people who potentially have years of stable life left to live. They raise issues with a lack of clear definition of capacity for young people, the lack of training to identify coercion, the structure of the service and the right of health professionals to opt out. Speaking to hospices more generally, I'm left asking, where is the Scottish palliative care strategy, promised 3.5 to 4 years ago, but not yet delivered? Where is the funding for hospice staff so that their pay can keep pace with pay for equivalent NHS staff? Why are we not investing in palliative care and making it sustainable? I would encourage the government to make progress in this regard. We talk about choice, and at one level, I absolutely agree, but we are not yet really giving people the choice of good palliative care. Presiding Officer, I've given all of the information careful consideration. I regret that I cannot support this bill in its current form, but whatever happens at the end of today, I will continue to engage in the process.
Thank you, Ms Bailey. I now call Sandesh Gohani to be followed by Patrick Harvey. Dr Gohani.
The declaration of interest, I'm a practising NHS GP and I also chaired the medical advisory group that advised on the bill. And I want to thank Liam MacArthur for being brave enough to bring this bill forward. Presiding Officer, today we face a fundamental question. Should this Parliament agree in principle to the Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adults Bill? Should we allow it to proceed to committee for full and detailed scrutiny? We all here are autonomous in our decision-making about all aspects of our life, except for our birth, SNP taxes, and at the moment, our death. There are colleagues in this chamber and the members of...
Jeremy Buffer.
I'm grateful to the member for taking an intervention on this point, because that is not the case for disabled people. Disabled people don't have the free choice to make things, because often those choices, because of their disability, are limited by society. Does he not accept that this is yet another pressure put on disabled people who do not have the same choice as those who don't have a disability?
Sandesh Gohani.
I'm sorry, no, I don't agree with that. And the reason is because we see consistent polling, disabled people wanting to have the choice, but also I truly firmly believe that it is important to have that choice for everybody within our society. There are colleagues in this chamber and members of the public in the gallery who feel passionately on both sides. Some strongly support this bill, others firmly opposed. And I respect every one of those views. But we must acknowledge a painful truth. At present, those in pain and suffering with financial means can travel to places like Dignitas in Switzerland to end their lives on their own terms. Those without such resources are left to suffer. A rule for the wealthy and another for everyone else. That cannot be right. This bill, with strict and careful designated safeguards, would give terminally ill people, regardless of income, the opportunity to choose a peaceful, dignified death at home, supported and safe. I support the bill at phase 1. And I want to be absolutely clear, this is not a position that I have come to lightly. As an NHS clinician, I have cared for many people in their final days. I have sat at the bedside of patients in pain that even the best palliative care could not relieve. I have heard families plead through tears that they wouldn't let a dog die like this. I have seen the quiet devastation of loved ones forced to watch suffering, knowing there is nothing more that they can do. And these experiences stay with you, they shape you. And they have led me to believe that we must do better. Where possible, we must offer compassion, choice and dignity at the end of life, and that is what this bill seeks to do. And let me emphasise, this is only phase one. We are not passing this bill today. We are deciding on its principles, the merits detailed, and scrutiny in committee. And I believe that they are. This bill proposes a limited, careful, controlled change in the law. It would allow mentally competent, terminally ill adults explicitly aged 16 or over, though I do agree we should increase it to 18, to request assistance to end their lives if they freely and consistently choose to do so. And it would allow mentally competent, terminally ill adults to request assistance at the end of their lives if they freely choose to do so, and then choose to go through with it, because they are not forced to go through with it. 2 independent doctors must confirm the person meets strict criteria with a mandatory reflection period. And I mention these protections because I know this proposal is distressing for many, especially those in the gallery today who oppose it on grounds of faith or principles. And as a Hindu and a person of faith, I understand and respect these concerns. The bill has not been rushed. It's the product of years of consultation, legal and ethical consideration, and careful medical advice. And it's been shaped by deep listening across society, professions and Parliament. Its focus is narrow and compassionate, to give those who are dying and suffering an option for peace at the end, under law with dignity and safety. That said, I must also acknowledge my own reservations. We must ensure strong, conscientious protections for clinicians. No doctor, nurse or pharmacist should feel pressured to be part of a procedure they do not believe in. We must invest in the systems to implement this safely. I'm sorry, I'm desperately out of time. And must be fair across communities. Finally, we must continue to improve palliative and hospice care. Presiding Officer, this is a painful and difficult debate, but one we owe to the public to have, openly, respectful and with care. This bill will not bring comfort to everyone, but for some it may offer peace, it may offer dignity, and it may offer a final sense of control in the face of death. And with compassion for those who oppose and care for those who suffer, I support the bill at phase one and urge colleagues to let it proceed to full scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr Buhani. I now call Patrick Harvey to be followed by Bob Doris. Mr Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I want to recognise not just the years, but in fact the decades of work by many people, and in parliamentary terms recognise the work of Jeremy Purvis and then Margot MacDonald, whose second bill I inherited when Margot died before she was able to bring that bill to the Parliament, as well as the likes of Kim Ledbetter and others before her who've advanced the argument at Westminster. I believe that Liam MacArthur's work on this bill marks a significant improvement on past efforts, learning from previous debates and scrutiny. And in discussing it, I'll be focused on the general principles rather than the detail today. This issue does require us to debate things that can be uncomfortable. And this issue also requires us to listen to each other in ways which Parliament always should, but often fails to do. I want to thank everyone who's been in touch with me, whether to express their support or to share concerns, questions or strongly held opposition on this issue. There's been long-standing public support for a change in the law, but it has taken time to create legislation that can properly bring the law into line with public views. As Liam MacArthur set out, there are many reasons for the complexity of any proposals for change, but it's not always recognised, as he said, that there is complexity, uncertainty and incongruity in the current law as well. But fundamentally, a great deal of this debate comes down to the very different values, valid and deeply held values, that we hold. We live our own lives by those different values, and we bring them to the debate as well. People may express their values in terms of individual autonomy, the relief of suffering, the equal value of all life, or for some people, the sanctity of life, the relationship between doctors and patients, or between carers and those cared for, and indeed the protection of the most vulnerable people in our society, or many other ways they'll express their values. But this debate, even though each of us will decide how we're going to vote tonight, this debate shouldn't be seen as one that's polarised between supporters and opponents. I don't think that most people are at one fixed point or the other. Many people who want Parliament to vote yes this evening understand and respect the concerns expressed by others and may share some of them. Many people who want Parliament to vote no do respect and understand the wish of others to express the right to choose. I know that some people who are concerned about a change in the law to some people who are concerned about a change in the law, the passionate support that some express for the principle can seem to obscure the social context in which people make choices. It's important that we recognise that social context, whether it's in terms of social care, health services, palliative care, and the diverse services and forms of support that many disabled people need to live their lives. We don't all make our choices in a context that is equal. And that's a point that I've heard Pam Duncan-Glancy make very clearly in particular, and I look forward to hearing her contribution to today's debate. Is that social context lacking in today's society? Yes, undoubtedly. Will it ever, even in the most optimistic version of our future, be perfect and unimprovable? No. If this issue is the central objection that some people hold to a change in the law to allow assisted dying, could there ever be some threshold of acceptability in terms of social context? I think it's very hard to make that case. But the context of our society is not static. So what we should be asking ourselves is whether legalising assisted dying will stop us from trying harder, or will it make us do better? Some people are genuinely concerned that the former will happen. Others, as Liam MacArthur set out, point to positive evidence from other places that we can do both, and that assisted dying and improving the support for people to live life on their own terms can be improved at the same time. But does this concern justify refusing to give people the help they choose on their own terms when they approach the end of their lives? Those fundamentally different values that I mentioned, all subjective and all valid, lead us to different answers on that question. But to me, that's the very reason why we should allow people to reach their own decision. Because if all people do deserve the right to live life on their own terms, surely they have the right to face its end on their own terms as well. In a media discussion with Pam Duncan-Glancy recently, I argued that our lives are our own, that our lives belong to us. And Pam replied by quite rightly pointing out that for many disabled people this is far from the practical reality of their lives. But arguing that our lives are our own does not mean that we ignore the way we depend on each other, between individuals and across society. In truth, nobody is truly and wholly independent. And the nature and degree of our interdependence differs markedly because of many factors, including disability and more. Interdependence can be one of the enriching things about human life. It shouldn't be dismissed or devalued. But I can't agree that it's right to use that as a rationale to legally impose a denial of the right to choose, and surely at the most difficult time in life, as we approach its unavoidable end, it's never more important that we're supported on our own terms as we would wish, rather than having someone else's choice imposed by force of the criminal law. And it's important precisely because our differing values matter. Presiding Officer, I genuinely don't know what choice I would make. Perhaps we can't know until we face it. But the choice should be there. To use the criminal law to force everyone down one path, one way of facing the end of life, because someone else has chosen, I can't accept that that is our right as legislators. And that's why I'll be voting yes to the bill.
Thank you, Mr Harvey. I now call Bob Doris to be followed by Douglas Ross. Mr Doris.
Presiding Officer, I'd like to thank Liam MacArthur for his exceptional way he's conducted himself in relation to this debate and for the committee and their efforts also. But the only thing that is clear about this afternoon's debate is that, irrespective of how we vote as MSPs...
Mr Doris, could you please check your microphone is in the correct position?
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you.
I'll maybe start again. The only thing that is clear about this afternoon's debate is that, irrespective of how we vote as MSPs, many of our constituents will be left deeply disappointed. The emails we have is testament to that, the sheer volume of them and the range of views. Whilst the debate on assisted dying should not be a polarised one, that can be challenging when the reality is parliamentarians are presented with a binary choice this afternoon. In considering this bill, we are all wrestling with providing autonomy and choice for a terminally ill person if they have an advanced and progressive disease, illness or condition. That has to be weighed up against a series of other considerations. For instance, consideration regarding both potential coercion and a lack of choice for some with terminal conditions that give me very real concern. I think the Scottish Association of Social Workers captured much of my concerns when they stated the bill focuses almost exclusively on physical conditions, neglecting the equally crucial role that relationships, financial circumstances, home environment and social networks play in such a decision. Presiding Officer, coercion can be very, very subtle and difficult to detect. No slight on medical professionals, but I'm not sure they are best placed to identify that. I note that social workers would like to see a mandated role for social work within the process, which would include a role in determining potential coercion. The Scottish Partnership for Palliative Care says... Yes, of course.
Rona Mackay.
Thank the member for taking the intervention. Would the member acknowledge that doctors, it's part of their everyday practice to recognise coercion, for instance, in abortion care or withdrawal of treatment? It's all part of their work, and extra training is going to be given in regard to this bill.
Bob Doris. I
absolutely do. Thank you for the intervention. I absolutely do acknowledge that, but I think the complexities at play here when we're talking about assisted dying means that I would not be reassured that that could be done adequately and robustly. Now, it is important, the Scottish Partnership for Palliative Care said it is important to acknowledge openly that there may be trade-offs between different goals. For example, maximising choice for some may increase a risk of coercion of vulnerable people and groups. Since procedural